You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
I'm Noble McIntyre of McIntyre Law, and I've been representing injured Oklahomans and their families for almost 30 years. At our firm, we've handled hundreds of crashes involving semis. They are huge vehicles, and when fully loaded, can weigh as much as 80,000 pounds. Most semi drivers are careful and professional drivers, but some big truck drivers and the companies they drive for are dangerous, and I've personally seen the devastating effects on families. If you or a loved one has been affected by a semi crash, contact us at 405-777-7000 or McIntyreLaw.com. We will fight for you.
Achieve platinum status in the Fuel Rewards program at Shell and save 10 cents per gallon on every fill. Right now, you're less than 5 miles away from your closest Shell, so make a pit stop this afternoon and fill your tank with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. Click the screen now to learn more about platinum status in the Fuel Rewards program or download the Shell app today. Platinum status is earned with 12 fill-ups over 3 months, 10-gallon minimum per fill-up at participating Shell locations. Terms apply. Visit www.fuelrewards.com/status.
It's back to school season for the kiddos, which means it's the perfect time to get your vacay on. Beaches are empty, resorts are quiet, and Cheap Caribbean Vacations has fall vacay deals up to, wait for it, 45% off.
Plus, you can score more site-wide savings and take an extra $50 off your booking now through September 5th. Take this as your sign to pencil in a vacay this fall and turn back-to-school season into back-to-beach season.
Go to cheapcaribbean.com to find your next all-inclusive vacay. Offer ends September 5th.
You can achieve platinum status in the Fuel Rewards program at Shell twice as fast by filling up 6 times with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. Right now, you're less than 5 miles away from your closest Shell, so make a pit stop this afternoon and fill your tank with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. Click the screen now to learn more about platinum status in the Fuel Rewards program or download the Shell app today. Platinum status is earned with 12 fill-ups over 3 months, 10-gallon minimum per fill-up at participating Shell locations. Terms apply. Visit www.fuelrewards.com/status.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
The following program contains coarse language and adult themes. Listener discretion is advised.
One, two, Freddy's coming for you.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of He Said, She Said. Tonight is part of our Spooktober Spooktacular. So that's why we had that scary little intro of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Well, I mean, we're also going to be talking about nightmares. I mean, the title is Something Wicked This Week. Nightmare.
And with me tonight is our awesome, pretty much all around everything guy, Rick. How are you doing this evening?
I'm the guy who was supposed to be the fill-in, who became the producer, who then became the fill-in host, who is now second chair. Hi, everybody. How you doing? I hope everybody's having a great Friday. Hopefully, some of you have been hanging out with me all day. We had over 200 in the chat today on the afternoon show, which is pretty good for a Friday afternoon. I will take that. So for those of you, I see a lot of folks popping in. Disclaimer, we are not responsible for any nightmares that you may have after watching and or listening to this episode. Don't judge us or blame us. Just saying. Okay, I think I've covered our butts. So how you doing, Aggie?
I'm doing fine. I won't be after this, but it's really funny because most people will have nightmares and they'll wake up and they'll be anxious and everything, and then it seems to dissipate. It just disappears, like it's just like cobwebs in your head. You get that feeling. But sometimes you get such a deep-seated nightmare that you cannot shake it, and you remember it vividly for the rest of your life. And that's pretty much what we're talking about tonight. Real and in sleep, I suppose. We can talk about real-life nightmares too.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we're going to talk real-life nightmares, I have 2 divorces under my belt, so we could start there. Just kidding. Let's not do that. Just kidding. Hey, Andrew, that's just the day that ends in Y, sir. He's like, I've been trolling Rick all afternoon. Like, that's the day that ends in Y.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Isn't that his job now?
Pretty much. He is now trying to fill some unfillable shoes, but he's doing his best. He's become the new norm of KLRN Radio, formerly held by Ron.
Yeah. Well, he cannot replace Ron, but he can succeed him. So, and he's doing a good job.
Oh yeah, he's the first one. Like 10 minutes before my show, I haven't seen you tweet today yet. You doing a show? I need your show. I'm driving today. Where's your show? Okay, Ron Jr.
God love him. He was so awesome.
Dude, there were so many times. I'm just being honest. There were so many times I just wanted to, and I wasn't really worried about it for everybody else because, I was never really trying to step on anybody's toes and I had to work all the time. So I would normally do my stuff super late at night. And it was still stuff that I really wanted to do. But there were times that I would get really discouraged because I'd come in, hang out for some of the earlier shows, see 50, 60 people hanging out in the chat. And then the later the night went, there were 20, 25. The later the night went, there were 5. By the time I went on air, it was Ron. And he's like, you better still do a show, fucker. Fine. I will, just because you asked. But, Andrew and I were actually talking about this the other day. I think he would be, and likely is, from wherever he's still watching from, completely ecstatic about where this place has bloomed into over the last few years. Now that I've just decided, hell with it, I'm going to either do it or it's going to blow up.
I think he would be very proud.
But yeah, so that's my other real life nightmare. What happens when you schedule a podcast and nobody shows up? Because I've been there talking to myself.
Well, I know. Yeah, it used to be that when I first started, I was lucky to have like 5 listeners, and that was, admittedly, it wasn't on X. It was over at the KLRN website. And I considered 5 listeners a good day. And so it's kind of blowing my mind that now that we stream through X and Rumble and YouTube, and all of the other platforms, that we're starting to get a lot of traction on our podcasts.
Aggie has Sally Field looping in her head every time I give her the numbers. They like me. They really, really like me.
Honestly, I have no idea where people listen to me. I just ramble on. I do. We all know this to be true.
They listen to you because you're amazing. That's why they listen to
you. Yeah, okay. Moving on. This is a nightmare show.
So, speaking of spooky season, there was one really cool thing when I logged in today that I could do today that I couldn't do yesterday. Restream Studio has new fonts now, so I found the weirdest looking one I could find to make the Chiron for the bottom of the screen tonight. So I was kind of tickled by that. I was like, that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's interesting.
But yeah, they
it's all magic. to me.
They did yet another update, which I think is because last night during the cocktail lounge, everybody was like, "What the hell's going on with the chat?" I'm like, "I don't know, and I'm not producing, so I can't go find out if somebody's changed the setting." But I think what happened is I think they were in the middle of doing some updates, and I think it threw something out of whack because it's been working just fine today. And then I logged in and realized that we have like new fonts and stuff now. So I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be taking advantage of this because I could make each show look even more unique now." Woohoo! Anyway. I have discovered I had a creative side more than I thought when I started figuring out layouts and scenes and everything else. I was like, maybe I really should have just been a drama kid. I'm having way too much fun with some of this. But anyway, so where do you want to start with nightmares? Other than my divorces, those are off the table.
Those are, we're not touching those. It's okay, we'll skip those. Well, I don't know. You can start with your. I mean, I have 3 that stand out that I actually dreamed, and to this day I can recall vividly.
All right. Well, before I have to do this, Andrew, I've taught you better than this. It's Aggie's sultry tones bring all the boys to the yard, so you can play off the milkshake thing. Come on now.
Oh, stop!
Anyway.
Stop!
Anyway.
Lord have mercy, no.
But no, I mean, so I'll probably start with one of the more tame ones that I have, and I'm pretty sure everybody's had this one. And it's more of like a, either prepubescent or a teenage nightmare where you suddenly find yourself in class and you look down and you're giving like a book report or something and you realize you don't have any pants on.
Oh, the naked in front of people one?
Yes.
Yeah. I've never had one of those.
Have you ever researched what some of these dreams mean? Because I have, and it's weird. Like if you have a dream that you're like you're dying, it actually doesn't mean what you think it means. In most cases, it means that you're afraid of a life change that may be occurring, and your brain's trying to process it through your subconscious. I thought that was weird. Another one, that same thing. You've ever had the nightmare where you're like, trying to eat something and suddenly your teeth start breaking off? That's another one. That's another significant life change, and your body and your brain and your subconscious are struggling with how to reconcile it. I've always been kind of interested in that stuff, primarily because I did have a really weird dream that actually terrified my parents, and I didn't understand why at the time. And we'll get to that one in a second because I just realized I kind of already gave my first one, so I don't want to hug all the time. I already did this for 3 hours today.
No, I've never actually had the naked in front of public, like public speaking or, delivering an address or anything like that in front of people dream. I've never had that. And I'm kind of glad I never did, because I have had to do public speaking for either for the volunteer organizations I was in, or at the schools, or, the PTO, for whatever reason. I never actually held any particular position, but for some reason, everybody wanted me to do all the talking. So yeah, whatever. I'm really good at talking, apparently. I just talk a lot. But I've never actually had that particular dream. Now, my sister had that dream, and she had anxiety for weeks after that dream. And I was like, but it's not a big deal. And she's like, you don't understand. I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm like, but you're not doing it. She was not going to be speaking to anybody. She wasn't going to be doing anything of that manner at all. And she was just completely frozen. So I guess it depends on the person, but it is a common nightmare to have that dream.
All right. So we've got a lot of folks chiming in from the chat. So Danielle said her worst dream ever was falling off a cliff. Again, since that is a death dream, that's probably at some point you were struggling with some sort of a life change. Jeff is apparently living his nightmare because his worst dream was being put in charge of programming at a podcast network. So there's that. Andrew has the exact opposite of the naked in front of class dream. His is terrifying to him when he's in front of class with pants on, apparently, because team no pants. So those are just a few of the ones we've been getting from the chat. But so on to one of my weirdest ones, and my parents were still together, and my brother wasn't born yet, so this would have had to put this somewhere between me being probably 5 or 6 years old. I was having this weird dream, and it much like what you were talking about earlier, and I don't remember if you said this on the air or off, but talking about how, I think it was on the air as we were just opening when you were talking about how most people, their nightmares kind of fade away and eventually they just go on about their day. I had a nightmare where, your internal monologue voice, the one that you hear when, you're just kind of going about your day, and instead of you saying things out loud, you're kind of having a conversation with yourself in your head of, did I do this? Did I do that? Did I do this?
Honestly, I have, it's not a conversation with just one voice. So,
okay. Well, that's a conversation for a completely different show. we'll have to have Dr. Phil or somebody on for that one. But so what happened was, though, my internal monologue during this dream would randomly speed up and slow down, like on a record player. Remember the old school record players where you could crank it up to like different revolutions and it would, records would play at different speeds, and depending on what sizes they were, they would either sound normal or sound weird if they were on the wrong speed. That's what my internal monologue voice was doing in this dream, and it completely freaked me out. So I woke up and I'm just and like I said, I'm like 5 or 6 years old. So I laid in bed for a few minutes thinking eventually it would go away, and I realized it was still doing it in my head while I was awake. And this was probably 8:30, 8:45 in the morning or so on a Saturday, if I remember correctly. So I went into my parents' room and I eventually woke them up, and I'm at this point legitimately kind of freaking out. I mean, I'm 5, 6 years old. I'm crying. And I'm like, I had a bad dream and it's still happening. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I had a dream where the voice in my head sounded weird. I'm 5 or 6 years old. I don't know how to explain this stuff to them, but I had no idea at the time because I didn't know this. My paternal grandfather was actually in an insane asylum. Every time I had ever seen him, I was told we were going to the old folks' home. I didn't find out until years later that he'd actually been committed for being bipolar schizophrenic at the time, because that was something you generally got committed for back then because nobody really knew how to treat it. I mean, this is late 70s, and he'd been in there for a while. So when I started saying this to my parents, that was the first thing they thought of. So I'm sitting here watching my parents freak out while I'm trying to describe to them a nightmare and something that's still weird going on in my head. And my mom is absolutely beside herself. And that terrified me even more. So this actually lasted for almost half a day, primarily because of how afraid I was from their reactions. But I think they were convinced that whatever happened with my granddad was happening with me a lot earlier than anybody expected that it would. And unfortunately, it does run in my family. My mom we don't speak anymore, but I'm fairly certain based on some behavior she was having before she stopped speaking to me that it struck her. My brother has some issues primarily tied to times that he was in the military and some things that he was exposed to, but I think it's also exacerbated that condition. So I understand why they were afraid. And as I got older and I started figuring out, things I didn't know about my own family tree, I started doing research, and that's when I figured out that there's 2 common forms of schizophrenia, and it's either there's a kind that will skip a generation, and then there's a kind that will hit every generation, but the one that hits every generation typically only hits 1, maybe 2 of the siblings if there's more than 1 or 2. And so I always kind of felt like I was in a ticking time bomb situation. And especially when I'm like playing back this nightmare moment in my head where I'm a kid and the voice in my head doesn't even make sense anymore. And I'm like, that's terrifying, especially knowing what I know now. So yeah, that's probably one of the most terrifying moments I've ever had. That was kind of a bleed over between a nightmare and actual reality. And then putting the pieces together years later, it was just like, maybe I'm lucky I'm not as crazy as I thought I could have been.
Yeah, there's that.
Notice I didn't say I'm not crazy. I just said I'm not as crazy.
I noticed. I did notice that. Now for me, this one was kind of weird. It's still a nightmare. I still, every so often, I'll relive it. I'll actually dream it again. And I've had this nightmare since about 1978, I want to say. It's my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and she is running her house for, she's she's performing exorcisms. Now, keep in mind, she's a devout Catholic, but she's not a priest. But it was like a hotel for people who were possessed by the devil. And she was the one that was like helping them through this stuff. But she wasn't so much helping as keeping tabs and keeping them all in one place. So that the priest, when he would have time, he would come over and deal with a couple of them. And then he would have to go back to his parish, that kind of thing. And blah, 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 and all that stuff. And she tasked me to help her with these people. And I was in charge of feeding them. Like I would take in the trays, which at my grandmother's house, there's no such thing as trays. You will eat at the table. You will not eat in one of her bedrooms ever. So that was kind of weird. But I would take the trays in and I would have to feed these possessed people. And they all had the same symptoms that Linda had. Okay. All of that stuff. And sometimes I would walk in and they'd be crawling on the ceiling and I would have to be like, please come down. I don't have time for this. I need to feed you. That kind of thing. But they were all over the house.
You're trying to be all civil with the possessed people.
Yes, because I was more scared of my grandmother. Okay, I was more scared of her than I was of the people that were possessed. So I would be like trying to reason with them and trying to get them to eat and all that stuff. And some of them would come at me and they would start choking me. And and my grandmother would come in and would castigate me for not controlling them. Keep in mind, at the time, I was 12. Okay. So she would get mad at me. And I had this unbelievable burden of having to deal with possessed people and my grandmother. And I'm like, it was almost, no, it was a ring of hell. It wasn't purgatory. It was a ring of hell because it wasn't just 1, 2, or 3 people in this house. This house had like 30 rooms and every room was occupied by somebody who was possessed. Okay. And I had to go room by room every day to feed these people. And I would start at 10 and I had to be done by 1. So in the space of 3 hours, I had to feed 30 people. And if I wasn't done at 1, my grandmother would get upset. Now, imagine my grandmother had 9 children who lived to adulthood and had their own families. I want to say over 100 cousins on my grandmother's side. We're Catholic and Hispanic. So that's why. And none of them were there to help me. I was the only one. There was no one else except my grandmother and myself. And it was this nightmare. Every so often I'll get it. I haven't had it often in the past maybe 15 years. I'll have it maybe once a year now. But there was a time when I was having this nightmare solidly for at least once a month. And it was the same nightmare. And I had to do the same chore with the same people. And it was insane because I was in a position where I was surrounded by people who were possessed by evil spirits. And I was more scared of my grandmother than I was of them. And they would try to kill me. They would try to slash me. I could not go in there with cutlery. So I had to hand feed them. So they would try to, eat my hand. I mean, it was the most insane thing ever. And to this day, I'm still more afraid of my grandmother than I am of those people. And I get anxious whenever I have that nightmare. I'll wake up and I'm full of anxiety. My heart is racing. I can't even drink water or anything. I have to pace, and I start going around in circles in the den until I feel my heart start slowing down. But to this day, I have no idea why that was triggered. I can only surmise that it was because my mom sat me down and she decided to watch The Exorcist, and it caught me unawares. That may have had something to do with it, but it wasn't my mother who was in the dream. It was my grandmother, and it was at her house, which had over 30 rooms or something. and I was hand feeding possessed people. It sounds so ridiculous. But it, when you're in that position, I mean, anybody that has seen The Exorcist, it's a scary movie. To this, I will never watch that movie again. Once was enough for me. And I mean, it's terrifying to see that child in that role, doing all that stuff and everything. And admittedly, there were other actors that were doing it, but still, it made an impression. So imagine that times 30 with people of varying ages and all of them wanting to kill me. And yet I'm holding my own with these people, but not with my grandmother. Go figure.
Well, I mean, your abuela sounds scary, so I'm just saying.
She was something else. I loved her very much, but because she had so many grandchildren, she seldom had time for all of us and everything. And maybe that's why she was more aloof when I was growing up, because honestly, when we would descend in her house, there were at least 30 cousins with me. There were at least 30 cousins. I mean, everybody was there. So she didn't have time for everybody. So I get it. But I mean, yeah, I was like, to this day, my mom laughs at me because of that nightmare. And I'm like, this is not funny. And she says, yes, it is. And I'm like, this is all your fault. She's like, I'm not the one that's doing this in your dream. My mom has no sympathy whatsoever.
I don't think I've ever told you this before, but when I started learning Spanish, I kind of became jealous of your language. Because you guys have little pet names built into like what you call like your grandmother that are so much cooler than the English ones. Like, you've got grandmas that are called Granny, Nanny, Nana, Gigi, whatever. You're just like my abuelita. Like, that just sounds so cool to me.
The diminutives, yeah. We love the diminutives. Actually, it's really funny because my dad's uncle, my granduncle, he was a famous historian in Puerto Rico, and he was also novelist out in Spain and everything. And one of the most beautiful books that he ever wrote was about my hometown, and I actually have a first edition copy of it. And in it, he describes when he would go to Spain for either, to teach at the Universidad de Madrid or, for whatever reason, and to hear the different accents of the Spaniards. And everybody's like, wait, what? Spaniards have accents? And I'm like, have you been to the US? we all have different accents here too. But it catches people unawares. But yes, every country has different accents in it. So
well, I mean, that's like Castilian Spanish in Spain. That was one of the funniest things to me, is realizing that most of that started because the king had a lisp and people didn't want him to be offended. Because when he tried to say S's, they sounded like, Cindy Brady. So everybody started doing it too, because I guess they were afraid he was going to yell off with their heads if they didn't. Yeah. Speaking of nightmares, imagine living in a monarchy way back in the day. That would have been a nightmare.
No, that's mm-mm.
So on
my nightmare is there's no plumbing in this castle. What? That's my nightmare.
You talked about that before. I thought that was with all the things that you've studied for and all the things that you've done. That was kind of a weird takeaway for me. Is like, okay, she's like, she's cool with looking at bones and everything else, but God forbid. Oh, backing up, I don't remember who it was, but I would like to point out, and I don't want to scroll to go find it, but somebody actually said one of their nightmares, and I'll get to the next one in the chat in a second, was that they were being attacked by invisible skeletons. My question is, if they were invisible, how did you know they were skeletons?
How did you know they were there?
Also, X-Brad, you're in the army now. You're in the army now. Oh, wait, my bad. Apparently, he had a dream the other night that he was back in the army again. I'm assuming he thought that was a nightmare. But speaking of kind of on the more mild side of nightmares, have you ever had a bad dream that's come true?
Weirdly, I did have one, but it was so vague. Like it was a dream, and all I was left with were impressions. So I couldn't tell you everything. But then, like later on, part of it did, it materialized, and I'm like, I know I dreamt about this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell you what it was. I know it has happened, but I can't remember what it was. But I remember that feeling.
Well, so weird things for me, right? I have deja vu quite often. And normally when I do, I've learned that it means that I'm on the right path somehow. Because things start happening that I've dreamt about. And then there's that are good dreams. Then there's when I have bad dreams repeatedly. Like there have been 4 times in my life that I've been in an accident of some kind. And I have dreamed about being in a car accident for weeks before it's happened. Unfortunately, not detailed enough to be able to say, yeah, I can avoid this if I can remember enough of it, but just enough to know that, once I start having a dream that I'm having a car accident more than once in a couple of weeks, I'm like, I start getting nervous. So at that point, I'm like, is my brain trying to tell me that this is about to happen somehow, and somehow I've tapped into something that lets me know that? Or is this about to become a self-fulfilling prophecy? Because it's happened every single time. Like the last time I wasn't even driving when my now ex-wife totaled my, can't even think of the name of the car. But it was the one we got right before I got the car we have now. And she totaled it while I was in it. But I was dreaming about us being in a car wreck for like 3 weeks before it happened. And I'm like, I wish I could dream detailed enough that I could change course. That would be amazing. Because it's happening.
Or the lottery numbers. I
Yeah,
wish I could dream those.
Dude, that would be see, that's the other thing. Like with as often as I have dreamed things that have happened in one way or the other, or I've had deja vu or kind of little signposts, whatever. When is it gonna be something that's gonna like forever change my life, like winning lottery numbers? That would be amazing. There's like that's like the guy you see in the news all the time that's been in the news like 5 or 6 times that's hit like the lottery 7, 8, 9 times, and I'm like, I hate you and I want to be you at the same time. This is not fair. Anyway. But yeah, so that's kind of a weird takeaway for me is I have, and it's been other little things too. Like even one of the times, unfortunately not the time that it really would have mattered, the one time that I should have weaved when I bobbed and it didn't work. But the second time somebody took a shot at me, I actually dreamed about it a few days before it happened. That was in pretty vivid detail, and it was weird because it was like this moment where, we had just signed a new contract, and it was an apartment complex, and we're outside of the guard shack, and my other partner's with me, the other business partner, and I kept telling him, you need to turn off the guard shack light when we're outside, and he wouldn't listen to me, so I was turning around to turn off the guard shack light. And much in the same vein as Donald Trump, if I hadn't turned around in that moment, there was a bullet that hit the guard shack right where I was standing 30 seconds ago. And right before when I was telling him to turn the light off, I had the hair on the back of my neck was standing up like Peter Parker style. And
that's creepy.
That was creepy. Because, yeah, I looked over, I was like, what the hell was that? And I looked over and there's a hole in the guard shack.
Oh, my word.
If I hadn't turned around to turn that off, I probably wouldn't be standing here right now, right? He said, I guess it's a good thing I didn't listen to you then. I was like, fucker. But that's what happens. That's what happens when you do the kind of work we used to do. You get a really dark sense of humor.
I guess. I mean, oof, okay, I all of my hair is standing up on end. That's kind of creepy.
You're welcome.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
I'm going to get a cranky text from Aggie at about 3 this morning. I'm still not sleeping.
Son of a bitch. Well, I think I still get a nightmare. Although now I would consider it just a dream, but it was a nightmare when I had it. I remember I was 5 years old. And I remember distinctly because my cousins, who were twins, fraternal twins, had just turned 7. And we had attended their birthday party. And the following day, we were supposed to go to the projects to visit my aunt. And we kids love going to the projects. I cannot express to you how much fun that place was. Yeah, I get it. It was lower income, whatever. They had a couple of swings, and they had the spinning wheel of death. That was awesome. Okay. But it was also the only place in my hometown at the time that was a building like with apartments, like more than 1 story high. So it was like 3 stories. And so for us, I mean, it was a big deal, being 5 years old. This is so cool. So we were going over there to visit my aunt, and I think my mom was bringing her some pernil or something. I forget what it was, but we're going to have like a little party over there. I think she was sick or something. And we were in the playground, and my aunt told us to stay away from the other side of the playground because the city had been digging a hole there and they broke a water main. So it was all full of water. No problem. We stayed away from it, and we just played in the wheel of death to see who could jump the farthest being spun away like that, right? It's a miracle we all lived. But anyway,
didn't we all play games like that back then, though?
Yeah, all the time,
It was just the way of life. It was like, you'd get you and like 4 or 5 of your friends on this big metal death trap merry-go-round, and then everybody would just take it off running, trying to get it spinning as fast as they can, then jump on, and the last one hanging on wins. I did that all the time when I was a kid.
Well, we had fun, whatever. Mom packed us up. My other aunt packed up my other cousins or whatever, and we all went home. And that night, after Mom gave me a bath and, washed my hair because I had landed on my head several times. Whatever.
I'm
explains a lot. They put me to bed and everything, blah, blah, blah. I'm
just going to play this because I don't want to say anything.
Anyway, so I have this really weird dream. I'm back at the projects on my bike, which I don't own. At the time I was 5 years old, I did not own a bike, but I had a bike in this dream. And I am riding my bike around the entire building. Nobody lives there. The hole full of water is next to the building as opposed to being away from the building on the other side of the playground, so-called. And it's apparently bottomless. And suddenly Godzilla is behind me and he's chasing me. And I am on this bicycle pedaling for my life because Godzilla is behind me and he is after me. And I come to the hole full of water, and my sister's there. And she's like, come on in, Godzilla cannot swim. And I'm like screaming at her going, we can't swim either, which was not true. I mean, we grew up next to a river. But in my dream, we could not swim. And so she's telling me, okay, throw me something so I can get out. And I'm like, there's no rope. And she says, that electrical cord is fine. And I'm looking at her going, you cannot climb with the electric cord. And she's like, it's fine. It won't hurt me. And so she grabs it. She like elevates her entire body halfway out to grab it, sinks back in, and then starts climbing up with a live cord. I mean, it's live. You can tell it's live because it's like sparking and everything. And she's just climbing it. But as she climbs, the cord keeps coming down. So she's just climbing in place, so to speak. And all of a sudden, Godzilla appears again, and he starts reaching for me. And I get back on the bike, and my sister's telling me, get back in the water. And I tell her no, because the water will kill us. Because at this time, the cord is in there, right? And so I get on the bike, and I'm pedaling, going around in circles on this stupid building while Godzilla, who is all of like 5 feet tall, is after me. And I'm just like pedaling for my life. And I would have that dream, that nightmare. Ever since that day, I would have it at least once a week. I would wake up screaming. I did not know that it was Godzilla, but I remember that later on that it was Godzilla because I remember seeing one of the movies at my cousin's house. I had seen it in passing, and that was the imprint that I got from it. But I just thought that it was this giant lizard monster, that kind of thing. And I would wake up screaming, and my mom would come in, and they took me to the pediatrician. They took me, the pediatrician said, well, she might need psychiatric help. And my father said, no, she doesn't. She's having a nightmare, and that's final. And after that, my dad put his foot down. He was not gonna. No, that wasn't gonna happen.
No,
not at 5 years of age.
It's gonna be nuts.
Yeah, not at 5 years of age. And it was funny because when I was down in the valley visiting my dad this past summer, I told him about that dream, and I told him I remember that you took me to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician suggested that you take me to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And he said, no, you were too young for that. And besides, you have to wait until you're old enough to mess up your life really well before you go to a therapist. And I'm like, okay, those are wise words. It's like, okay. But that dream stuck with me, and I would have it regularly to the point where I could predict when I was going to have it. And I have it maybe once every 3 months now. But there was a time when I would have that dream almost every night, and then almost every week, and then every month. And then it stayed for once a month for decades that I would have this dream. And now it's down to, and now that I actually am older and I see how ridiculous it is being an older person and saying, yeah, Godzilla's my size. Well, he can still kick my ass. But, I'm just like, I can see where this was a nightmare back then, but it's not really a nightmare now. I'm not scared of it. I don't wake up with anxiety like I do with my grandmother. So I guess it's manageable now. But when I was younger, this thing scared me so much that my parents had to take me to the pediatrician because they didn't know what to do. They had no idea what was causing it. They didn't understand. And I think it has something to do with the fact that at a very young age, I decided to take a screwdriver and stick it in a socket. So I understood a healthy respect for electricity. So when my sister was messing with that live wire, I guess, I was not going in that water. I just was not. And of course, I never knew why Godzilla was like chasing me, and only me. My sister was there right for the taking, and he never was interested in her. He was just chasing me. Maybe he wanted my bike. I don't know. But, like I said, now it's manageable. Every so I'll have that dream and I'll wake up and I'll be like smiling because now I see it as a comfort of my childhood, of what I went through.
It's like, haha, Godzilla, you don't terrify me anymore. Now, Godzuki, on the other hand, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, so that was it cracks me up. But I was 5 when I started having this nightmare, and it stuck with me. And for the life of me, I don't understand why I still have it. I'm 50. I'm going to be 58 this year. I don't get why I'm still having this nightmare.
Because you're still a kid at heart, Aggie.
No, that's not it.
No, that's it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Damn it. Because I've decided at this point I've gotten as old as I'm going to get. I have Peter Pan syndrome from now on. Damn it.
Well, it's nice to stay young and feel young and everything. God, I hope they're not listening, but my sister sent me pictures and I love my sisters to death, but I'm like, you need to wear sunscreen. It's just like internal screaming. And for those of you out there, it's just that I did work in a hospital for a while when I was younger, and my husband was a pathologist for a very long time, and so I, all sorts of cancers. I got used to seeing the slides and all that stuff, so I try to take care of my skin, and it's not difficult to take care of your skin. So this is why I scream at my sisters: sunscreen. That's all. That's it. Sunscreen. Just do that. That goes a long way, but they don't care. And then they're gonna bitch and moan about me at me, going, "Why do you look so young?" Oh, I don't know. Maybe because I wear sunscreen.
You know how you should start answering that question?
How?
You put the lotion on its skin, or else it
gets the hose again.
I mean, you're at one point, half your family thought you were crazy already anyway.
How funny. So how about you? And any other nightmares for you? I'm saving the worst one for last.
Yeah, no. So we talked about this one a little bit before air, but this one was weird for me because this is when I figured out that apparently not everybody can dream in color, because we were watching Frankenstein, like the old school classic black and white Frankenstein. And when I went to bed that night, and again, this is when my dad was still in the home, so I'm going to say probably pretty close to the same age where the other really bad dream happened. And if I remember right, they were actually fairly close to each other. Correlation? Possibly. Who knows? But so yeah, the thing that freaked me out, it wasn't that there was a monster chasing me, because I unlike you, I didn't ever think about why isn't there a bathroom in this castle, but I had the dream that I was being chased through Frankenstein's castle. And it was in black and white. And the thing that tripped me out the most about it wasn't necessarily that the monster was chasing me, because yeah, that did freak me out. But it was that for the first time ever, I was dreaming in complete black and white. And I was actually freaking out because somewhere in the back of my mind, I was still somewhat lucid enough to go, where did all the color go? What the hell's going on? And no, I mean, not in those exact words, but and I remember telling the next morning, I told my dad, because I woke up early, Dad, I had a nightmare. I had a dream that Frankenstein was chasing me. He said, well, no more watching those movies with you for a while then. I'm thinking, you let a kid watch that at 5, bro. That's how much different parenting was back then. It's like you with the screwdriver in the socket. That reminds me of the 80s sitcom where Stacy Keach was the dad, and the kid's going for the fork with the light socket. And Mom's like, no, and he sits forward in his chair and is like, no, wait a minute. Like, all of a sudden you see the lights flash you. This is it. He's like, I bet you won't do that again.
Honestly, I did that at my aunt's house, and my parents were outside in the houses in Puerto Rico are totally different. They have like a place where you can park your car, but it's not a true garage. It's just it's just a place to park your car under the cement. It's like a carport built into the house, and but most people just use it for like socializing outside. And so they were all there, my aunt, uncle, my parents. My sisters were in the back with the swings or whatever. And I go inside and I had to use the restroom. Coming back out, I see that there's a screwdriver on my aunt's vanity, and it's right next to the socket. So I just picked it up and I was like, I wonder what it feels like. And I put it in there. I fall back onto the bed and I'm looking at the ceiling, waiting to get back to normal. Okay. And I go back outside and my dad looks at me and says, what's wrong? And I was like, nothing. What did you do? I said, nothing. What did you do? And I said, I stuck a screwdriver in the socket. And my dad, I swear to God, I love that man. He looked at me, it's like, well, you're not going to do that again, are you? And I said, no. That was it. He didn't punish me. Nothing else happened.
Natural consequences are more important than
I have
punishment.
a very healthy respect for electricity because of that. So
So one of Danielle's apparently real life nightmares was her siblings. Apparently she was being tormented by them when she was younger, and they kept telling her that a plane was going to fall on her, which has now apparently led to a healthy fear of flying for her.
oh, poor thing.
Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
siblings can be mean.
well, yeah, I was the older brother. I was not always nice to my kid brother, but you know, it happens.
Oh, I'm the oldest one, and they all ganged up on me. I was putty. I was the doormat.
But yeah, so my last official nightmare, and again, this one is all my parents' fault. I couldn't sleep for a week, and I've told this story before. The premiere week of Alien, one of the scariest movies you could ever show to a 6-year-old in a movie theater.
Oh, goodness, yes.
My parents took me to watch that movie. I was terrified. I could barely sleep for a week. I was terrified for a month. My friend down the street had cable before we had cable, and I had dinner at his house one night, and that came on the TV, and I swear to God, I had goose pimples everywhere just from the stupid little creepy crawly crab thing, and I went home. I was like, no, I'm not. It's like, this movie's awesome, and of course, he's 4 years older than me, so of course, to him, the movie is awesome. At this point, I think I'm maybe 7. And he's like, it's an awesome movie. You should watch it. I said, I've seen it, and I don't want to see it again. I'm going home. But yeah, that movie terrified me, and and the funny thing is, I actually, and this is a complete aside, but I almost never let my parents pick a movie again. Actually, at one point, my mom wanted to really go see the movie Chariots of Fire. I had no idea what it was about. I was going off of the title, and I'm like, you've already taken me, and this is my parents were still together, so I think it was right about probably 2 months before they split up. So 7 headed towards 8, maybe. And she's like, well, we're going to go see this movie. And no, no, I don't want to go see that movie. I don't want to see anything about flaming chariots. And she's like, that's not even what it's about. I'm like, I don't care. I don't want you. So me, I got to pick the movie and cartoon, of course, but I think I'm remembering this correctly because I remember I got to pick the movie. I'm pretty sure we went to see Rats of Nim. I did not choose wisely for a child. Although I do really still like that movie, but it was actually kind of terrifying for me.
The Secret of Nim.
Yeah,
I love that movie to this day.
Oh, it's a great movie. It's a great movie, but again, you know, kind of when you have an aversion to rats. No.
Yeah, maybe not. No,
And
I
then-
will say Chariots of Fire was one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. And of course, after watching it, I had to, do some research on all of the people who they portrayed, and some of the stories were heartbreaking. But it was such a good film.
Yeah,
Not a nightmare.
I still honestly have not seen it. So I'm starting to worry about the mental health of some of our chat participants. This is from Raptor. I've wrecked my plane 3 times. No nightmares.
Wow.
If you're being honest and you've wrecked a plane 3 times, you should probably stop flying, bro. You're pushing the odds. Just saying, you're kind of pushing the odds. But
I can't. Oh my goodness, I can't even. He may not have nightmares about that, but now I'll be having nightmares about a friend of mine crashing his plane. What? No.
Aggie's gonna be yelling at you tomorrow. I had a dream that I was at your funeral, you asshole. All
Yeah.
right. So I know you said you had one that you wanted to save for last. So I have a couple of actual real life haunting stories that I have experienced that I figured I would close with, and then I figured we'd let you go into your worst story because I don't have quite as many nightmares, or mine were quicker. I've told these stories before, so I may not go into too much detail. One of them, I think I actually brought up a little bit last night, or last week. So the one that, why I said last night, anyway, getting tired. Don't judge me. But so the other one, and this is one of those times when I convinced my mom that I should be allowed to stay out. You know the whole credo when we were kids: you better have your ass home before the street lights come on, or I'm going to come find you and beat you.
Mm-hmm.
I convinced my mom because I came home before the street lights came on. I'm like, come on, Mom, all my friends are telling ghost stories, and I really want to stay out a little bit longer. Okay, fine, you can stay out for 30 more minutes. So I go down to the neighbor house again, the same house that I a couple weeks ago was telling everybody that my oldest son and I rescued the guy from the only 2-story on the block. And so they're telling ghost stories. And so, of course, after third or fourth one, I'm starting to get a little freaked out. And by then it's been about 10 or 15 minutes. And I'm like, I think I'm just going to go ahead and go home. And I'm just walking along, minding my own business. Of course, the porch light and everything's on. I swear to you, as I'm going up the steps, it gets harder and harder and harder for me to walk. Like, just the point where my feet are feeling heavy. I feel like there's something trying to reach out and grab me. And I can just, like, every muscle in my body is tight. I'm literally starting to freak out. And I'm just, got to get to the door, got to get to the door, got to get to the door, got to get to the door. And I finally make it into the house. And just as I'm shutting the door, I feel this gush of wind come by me. And I was like, what the heck was that? My mom was looking at me like, you look like you've seen a ghost. I said, I think I might have just been being chased by one. Hey, you're just imagining things. 2 weeks later, I saw a floating orb in our hallway when I got up to go to the bathroom at 3 a.m. I don't think I was imagining.
I am not sleeping tonight. I can tell. I can tell already.
So me, thinking my dad would, console me or whatever, because this is again before my dad had left. I'm describing to him what I saw when I got up that night to go to the bathroom the next morning, and I'm like, "Hey, Dad, I saw this weird thing in the hallway. Like this little bright light was just kind of sitting over in the corner." He's like, "Oh yeah, I see it all the time. I'm pretty sure it's a ghost." Gee, thanks, Dad. Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Dad. Appreciate that. But see that's the semi, not really malevolent experience with haunting that I've had. I've had an even worse experience, and I've discussed this one before. Going into a little bit more detail than I had before previously. I was taking swim lessons at the Y. This is after my dad left. My dad's idea of trying to teach me how to swim, we had a boat. He took me out in the middle of the lake, threw me into the lake, and said, "You're either going to swim or you're not." Well, I didn't. So he had to save me because I freaked the hell out and I froze. So a couple years later, because I'm still terrified to swim, I was like, I'm going to put you in swim lessons at the Y because it was cheaper than daycare. So after school, they would come get me and I would go to a couple times a week, go to the Y for swim lessons, and it knocked down the daycare cost and it actually saved her money in the long run. So this is back before they had all the fancy floaties and stuff that they have now. So they had the little paddleboard things that you could use when you couldn't swim if they wanted you to work on your paddle, your kicking or whatever in the deep end. And that's what everybody was doing. Well, to me, it seemed like we were there. We were in the deep end for an extremely long time. And my legs were starting to get tired. So I raised my hand and asked for permission to go ahead and go back to the shallow end so I could touch, because I was kind of scared to be in the deep end, after nearly drowning as a child once already. So I'm over there by myself, just kind of having fun, floating on the little board, kicking around, splashing. Everybody else is still over there, and I'm in the pool by myself. Nobody's around me. So I'm over by the edge of the pool. And at first I just thought it was because I was playing with the board. At first I just thought that I had pushed it up high enough where one of the jets caught the board and pushed me backwards. And that's what I thought at first. So I started trying to swim back the other way, and I couldn't. I was being pulled out into the center of the pool. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried to fight against it, in a pool that should have almost zero current, I was being pulled into the center of the pool. So the harder I fight, the more I lean back away from the board. Eventually, I wind up being turned upside down. The last thing I remember is staring up from under the water, looking at my feet sticking up. At that point, I lost consciousness. The next thing I remember is being woken up by paramedics giving me mouth to mouth. This happened at the YMCA in Midwest City, Oklahoma in 1981.
Wow.
You're welcome.
Oh my God, I am not sleeping tonight. Holy cow. Oh my God, no. There are good. I really firmly believe that there are good spirits and malevolent spirits still floating around. Yes. And my grandmother was very sure that there was a ghost that lived in her house. Now, the house that she lived in, her last house, was built brand new from the old house, which had been eaten by termites because it was a wood structure. So my dad had a new house built for her. But the old wood structure, she had been living in there since before she got divorced. She got divorced 38, I think it was, in 38. So that house it was beautiful. It had very tall ceilings because, in Puerto Rico, we don't have central air. All the doors were louvered. They had transoms, and all that stuff. It's really cool. And I loved that house. It was so pretty. But my grandmother always said that there was a ghost of the previous owner of the house because he had passed away in his sleep and his family decided to sell the house. And that's how my grandparents ended up buying that house. And she always felt that that ghost was there. But it never did anything bad. And she always felt that his presence was there to make sure that nothing bad happened. I figured, well, grandma being grandma, I'm not going to even, whatever. So I'm there when I'm 16 years old, visiting my family in Puerto Rico. And I'm staying with my grandma. And it is a 2-story house, one of the few 2-story homes in the city, in the hamlet. It's not a city. And so one day I'm outside and the washing machine is actually outside. It's not inside the house. And I'm actually doing all the laundry and everything. And I hear her scream and I run inside. She's at the bottom of the stairs. The house is a concrete house. The stairs are cement with, that tile that everybody is now looking to get.
Hang on. I don't mean to interrupt you, but this needs to be clarified. Is it a concrete house or a brick house?
It's made of concrete.
House. Oh, wait, never mind.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, but
I was trying to work a song into the story. Don't judge me.
But the tile is that Italian tile with all the little pebbles in it that people are now going insane over. And I'm like, that's like the cheapest tile you can get for any house, but whatever. And it's all cement. It's all, because cement floors are cooler. So they keep the house cool. She fell. And I was in a royal panic. I run outside. I screamed to the lady across the way to please get her son to come over because he was an EMT. And I keeping my grandmother as still as possible, I go and I call the ambulance, which this is prior to 911 in Puerto Rico. Okay, there was no 911 yet, and so I had to call the actual number. And he comes in. We get her. We put a pillow under her head and everything, and we ask her, "Where does it hurt? Where does it hurt?" She says, "I don't hurt anywhere." And I'm like, "You literally screamed. I don't understand. What do you mean you don't hurt anywhere?" She was like, "Well, I screamed because I was scared, but I didn't feel any of the stairs when I was falling. And when I ended up on the floor, the only thing that I hit was my temple." And I'm looking at it, and she's got the beginnings of a bruise. And my grandmother at the time, I want to say, I don't know, she was old. But most of the time when somebody that age falls, they're going to have a broken something. No, she was perfectly fine. And, the ambulance came, they took her to the hospital. They did x-rays. They did a full workup. My parents were there and everything. No, she just had a bump on her head. And so she comes home and she's like, "I don't understand why you're doing all this fuss and blah, 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 and all that stuff." And we were like, "You literally fell down the stairs. I mean, of course we're going to make a fuss out of it." She's like, "You don't understand. I didn't feel the stairs because I was being held." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm a little confused now. What do you mean you were being held? You were alone." She's like, "We are never alone, not in this house. I've told you." And she just said, "Okay, I'm going to bed." And I'm like, what is she talking about? She really thinks there's a ghost here. And my dad looks at me and says, "I'm not going to fight her on this." And I'm like, my dad is the most skeptical person I know. Okay. But he was willing to just drop it because he could not explain how this happened. So he was just willing to go on faith and just leave it alone. And that's when I knew that there is basis for this story. And it was weird because my dad was telling me that after my grandmother died, my cousin and her husband decided to buy the house. And so they moved in and everything. And my dad asked, "Has anything weird happened or any at all?" And my cousin said, "It's really weird, but the day after we moved in, someone opened the front door and then closed it. So we don't know what happened. The front door opened and closed. We looked at it. And after that, nothing ever happened in that house. So my guess is that the ghost decided, yeah, okay, my job here is done. I'm leaving." So I don't know. I'm just telling you what I remember happening when I was 16. I mean, that scared the hell out of me. I honestly thought my grandmother was dead. And I was the only person in that house. And I'm just like, how do I handle this? I'd never been in a position like that, right? And I'm just, I scream for the lady to send me her son who's an EMT. I go in there. I put a blanket on her. I put the pillow. I call the ambulance, all this stuff. And she's like, "I don't know why you're making such a fuss. I'm fine." I mean, I didn't feel anything. Like, how do you not feel anything when you fall concrete stairs? And so I don't know. But that's the ghost story in my family. That's the one that's the only one I can think of.
So and this is just to give everybody a quick thank you. Right now, on my feed, we are number 1 on Live on X. I know that varies, but we're also beating Real America's Voice, which is an actual cable network. So thank you.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, I guess should I talk about my last nightmare? Because this one was pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, we've got about 20 minutes left, so I figured that's just about enough time for you to freak everybody out before we leave.
This one hurts because I did not get this nightmare until about I want to say about a year and a half ago. And I've had it a few times since then. And it's, if I lose it on air, don't you all judge me, okay? I'm just going to put that caveat out there. But I actually talked to my sister. She wants to flesh this out as a novella and wants it published. She thinks it has good potential for something like that. And I'm like, I do not care. And she's trying to encourage me to actually write it. And I'm like, I lose my, I just can't. But anyway, I am a suburbanite. You know, first of all, I'm blonde. I don't know why. Second of all, I live in Champaign, Illinois. Again, I have no idea why. But I am married to a newspaper editor. And we live in Champaign, Illinois. And we have a beautiful little girl. And there is a serial killer who is abducting children. And the way that he lets the parents know is that he will abduct a child, kill the child, and uses the palms of the child's hands to make a painting. And then he leaves the painting on the doorstep of that child's parents. And that's how he tortures his the parents. That's how he lets them know that the child is dead. I lose my child. She disappears. I am going insane. I need to locate my child. I can't find her anywhere. There's a search party that happens. Because my husband's a newspaper editor, it's on the news. It gets, a lot of traction. And one morning, I go to get the newspaper, and there's the painting. And I completely break down because I know that my child is dead. But then I feel a little hand touch me, and I turn to see the spirit of my child next to me. She can't talk to me, but she's trying to soothe me. And she is going to let me know how to catch this guy. And so the police come. This is all very disjointed because this is how it happened in my dream. It is kind of disjointed. The police come, and then, we're telling them how we found it. They take it away to do lab work on it. And, I'm sitting there and I'm very calm. And the police guy just doesn't know what to do with me because just 20 minutes before I was completely out of my mind. And I tell him she's going to help me find him. And he's like, who is she? I said, my daughter. I said, ma'am, your daughter is dead. And I said, her body is. And my husband doesn't know how to handle me or anything and says, honey, why don't we go talk to doctor? And I said, no, I know what I'm doing. If you want me to at least be calm, I have to see this through. And so I start, with her help, who cannot talk to me, but she can communicate with me. I start to figure out where, the general location. I start getting clues and all that stuff, and I'm turning them into the cops and everything. And so the big reveal comes and everything. And there's a group of people, and she appears and she points him out to me. I'm the only one that can see her. Okay. She points him out to me, and I see him. And weirdly enough, and if anybody ever saw the movie Angel, do you remember that movie?
I don't know if I've seen that one.
She was a schoolgirl that was also a prostitute at night because she lost her mother. She didn't know how to pay for her schooling or anything like that. But anyway, the guy that was killing all these hookers That same guy, that was the guy that she was pointing out. And without a thought, without even saying a word, I went after him. And I jump on this guy and I start beating the shit out of him. And the cops come, it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? That's, that's so-and-so. Like he's like some bigwig entrepreneur or whatever. And I said, no, that's the killer. She told me that's the killer. And you see, the guy gets up and he's looking at me going, you can't possibly know that. And at that point, the cops were like, what did you just say? And they take him away. And I'm like, they should have let me finish him. They should have let me finish him. At this point, I have no idea where my husband is. I don't know what happened to him or anything. But that has been possibly the worst nightmare I've had as an adult. Because most people with children know if you lose a child, it's just completely devastating. You don't recover from something like that, no matter the age of the child. So for me to go through that, I woke up and I had been crying. My pillow was sopping wet. My body was completely, everything was sticking to me because I was just in a cold sweat. And I got up and I went to the bathroom and I turned on the lights to wash my face and everything. And I had to sit on the couch for about an hour and a half to calm down because I could not I didn't want to risk going back to sleep and having that nightmare again. And I'll have it every so often. And it changes a little bit in some of the detail, but for some reason it still leaves me as a blonde in Champaign, Illinois. I do not understand that whatsoever. I've never been to Champaign, Illinois. I don't know what it looks like. I have no idea. But I'm a blonde. I don't think I have blue eyes, but I am a blonde. And that is still the scariest thing that I've ever had to deal with as a nightmare. I'll even take my grandma and the exorcisms over this. It's that bad.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm in tears right now.
I can tell. I wasn't going to say anything if you didn't, but yeah, I can tell.
But yeah, that is quite possibly the worst nightmare I've ever had. But it was really weird that she was with me the whole time. She could not talk, but she was telling me. She could communicate with me and telling me where to find the clues, what to look for, all these things. She couldn't just come straight out and take me to him because she did not know where she had died. And honestly, I don't know how he went about killing the children, but the method of letting the parents know such a torture of the handprints on a piece of canvas, it's just diabolical to me, And so that has kind of stuck. My sister said, this is a good basis for a story. And I'm like, I am not writing this. I can't write this. This is just, I can't. It makes me feel like I'm drowning. I can't write that. So she wants me to copy down some of the details and she'll see about actually writing it as a novella. She does that for fun. I mean, the writing, not the torture part.
Well, the torture part's the bonus.
Yeah. But yeah, that's quite possibly the worst nightmare that I've ever had. Like I said, I'll take the 30-room exorcism hotel that my grandmother was running.
It's almost like you had like a blend between like The Exorcism and The Shining with your grandma as the main person. It's kind of weird.
It is. It's kind of it is kind of weird. But I will say this: it did not look like the Overlook Hotel. My grandmother's house did not look like that.
So, speaking of nightmares, because apparently we're all living in one. This is from Secretary Anthony Blinken's account from 3 hours ago. The U.S. is at the forefront of humanitarian response to the growing crisis in Lebanon, announcing nearly $157 million in assistance today. Yet our own citizens are getting $750 apiece in the middle of a hurricane. We're being run by clowns.
Oh yeah.
And if this entire administration and every communist isn't run out on a rail, first in this election and then in the 4 years after this election, I'm buying an island. I don't know how I'm buying the island yet, because in Commulomonomics land, I'm having to work the equivalent of 4 jobs just to keep things like they were before. But I'm going to figure it out because I'm about done. Anyway, so yeah. So speaking of spooky season, your government wants you dead. How's that for spooky?
That's that's pretty much day ending in Y at this point.
Pretty much. But,
and that was something that I've been trying, well, I'm pretty sure I'm not changing anybody's minds or anything like that. But when you have the government that we do and how they're treating people during times of distress and tragedy, I mean, what other conclusions can you draw from it?
I'm sorry, this is not my fault. It's Steven's fault. I like to move it, move it. She likes to move it, move it. We like to move it.
I used to play that pandemic game, and if Madagascar shut its ports, then you'd lost the game. So the trick was to make sure that you infected Madagascar first.
Wait, so there was a pandemic game that if Madagascar closed its ports, it was like an automatic sinking the 8
Yeah,
ball
there was, because the trick was to play this game, you had to infect the entire world so that you would have mass casualties. Gee, I wonder where they got this idea from. Actually, this game came well before 2020 because my kids used to play it back in 2003, I think it was, though. But it was the same concept, But if Madagascar got a ship in before they closed the ports, then you were okay. But if they closed the ports before your ship could get there, then you'd lost the game. Because the trick was Madagascar was it. You needed to get Madagascar.
If Madagascar falls, so goes the world.
Pretty much, yeah.
Seems like a weird premise to the game, but I don't know. But all right, we got about 7 minutes left. Any final thoughts? Any other ways to terrify our audience before we bid them good night?
No, I made a fool out of myself already.
You did not. Oh, hush.
Oh, goodness. No, that I'm telling you, that night, I mean, seriously, the concept actually would be very cool as, a suspense, a book, a novel in suspense or whatever. But I cannot bring myself to write something like that. All of my writings tends to be more on the quirkier side. Some are sad, but not like this. Nothing like this. So I should write about my grandmother and the exorcism hotel. That would be funny.
Yeah, you probably should read about that one. I would probably read that. But I would like to point out later this evening, when you can't sleep tonight, I had a much funner and funny topic lined out.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And we need to save it for November then.
So later tonight, when you're cursing at everyone for them sharing all their scary stories in chat and all the things that I told you, just remember, this was your idea.
This was my idea. It's on me. I'll take the blame. It's on me.
She's gonna be laying in bed tonight at 3 a.m. Still can't sleep. Damn it, Aggie! Why did you do this to yourself?
Oh, I don't plan on sleeping at all. And I was not going to bring this up, but Calvin replied to my tweet about his nightmares, and yes, I have had sleep paralysis, and that is hellacious to feel.
See,
That is a fear unlike any other.
see, I've never had it, but I've seen a movie and even a TV show once where one of the characters had it. And then for the longest time, I was, what if I fall asleep and then I wake up and I can't move? Because that's just how my brain works. So the fact that I didn't have it, but I saw other people that did have it in movies and TV shows, led me to think that I might eventually get it, and then it made it hard for me to sleep. So I guess I should have put that on my list too, even because
It's just, it happens to some people and it can be very frightening. I know the first time that it happened to me, I honestly thought that was it. I was dying. The second time it happened to me, I was like, I'm not done sleeping. So I closed my eyes again. So I kind of like tucked myself back into sleep and then woke up gradually.
Oh, I take that back. I did have it once, but it wasn't anything that I really considered sleep paralysis. It was I had to have some sort of oral surgery or something when I was a kid, and I was coming off of whatever they had given me. And when I got home, they were like, he's going to need to sleep this off for a little bit. And when I woke up at first, I couldn't move. And I just assumed it was, from whatever they had given me. But it's probably the closest I've ever been to sleep paralysis. And I have to admit, it's actually terrified me, especially because, later in life, I did spend about 6 months in a wheelchair. I don't ever want to go through that again. And there have been a couple of times where I will have random misfires and have to use a cane for a little bit. And there was one time, this went on for almost 2 weeks. And at that point, I was about to make an appointment with a specialist to be like, did something go wrong? Has something shifted? What the hell's going on? And then it just stopped. Now, every once in a while, randomly, I'll get up and, my legs don't work quite right for a day or so, and it slows me down. Or like the other day, I completely crash, and then I wake up feeling like crap, and then everything hurts, including my teeth, because my whole body's misfiring somehow. I'm like, but yeah, that's why I was down Sunday and Monday. And that's when I decided, you know what? I can't do 7 days a week anymore. I'm going to do 6. Can't do 7. I'm going to do 6. So Monday, other than pushing buttons for the ladies of the red wine, is pretty much going to be a day off for me. But it still won't technically be a day off. It just won't be as labor intensive because I won't be prepping shows or anything other than for the stuff they need me to do. But it's going to give me time to be able to, keep up with my house a little bit better.
Well, not this Monday.
No, what about not this Monday?
No, because that's the Spirit of Books is this Monday.
Well, yeah, I know. But yeah, that's my only. That's the 1 day a month I was trying to take off out of anywhere between 27 to 30, 31, depending on the number of days in the month. So that is actually still my full day off, or was. I actually have an interview scheduled for an in-depth piece that I'm going to be trying to put together for the Beacon that I hope to have out sometime later this week. Then I don't want to say too much.
I look forward to it. I know what it's about, but I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, I know a few people do, but I'm not trying to say too much about it. But since we are just about out of time, and since I have like an extensive list, where can folks find you?
They can find me at Aggie Beacon and at Aggie the Barkeep. Those are over on X. You can find me 8:30 p.m. Eastern Tuesday nights doing the Cocktail Lounge with the ever suave Brad Slager. 8:30 p.m. Eastern Friday nights doing He Said, She Said with the awesome Rowdy Rick. That would be you. Once a month, the last Wednesday of every month, the guys get together at 8 p.m. Eastern to celebrate everything that makes toxic masculinity. They host Babe of the Month, and I bring the drink of the evening. And last but not least, as I mentioned before, Spirited Books, first Monday of every month at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. So watch for that this coming Monday. We are keeping with the Spooktober theme, and watch for some spooky books to be covered. That's all I'll say about that.
Nice.
And how about you?
All right. Well, as for me, it is Front Porch Forensics night tomorrow night. So that one kicks off at 9 p.m. Eastern, I believe, if I'm doing the math right. And if I'm not, Jeff will yell at me in a minute because I've been getting that wrong all week. Unfortunately, Bump Stock Barbie is under the weather, so I'll be taking second chair as well as production duties on that one. And then 90 minutes later, it'll be time for Juxtober to continue with our deep dive into vampires. And then Sunday night, I'll be back, assuming I don't crash again, with America Off the Rails at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Monday off, other than prep work for Beacon and trying to catch up on some Twitchy things. And then Tuesday through Friday next week, Rick Robinson show, now noon to 3 p.m. You guys know most of the rest of the schedule, so I'm not really going to keep going into it. If you are so inclined, please make sure you are following along with myself at RowdyVic73 and, of course, at Aggie Rican, because if you're not following her already, what the hell are you even on X for? And you can follow along with the station at KLRN Radio, as well as our new news arm at Digital Beacon US. Hope you guys have enjoyed the show tonight, because we gave ourselves nightmares to entertain you. Just saying. That should count for something, damn it. Bye, everybody.
Have a good evening, everyone.